The internet is inseparable from access to jobs, education, and daily functions. But by and large, states consider internet access a luxury, not a right. Not everyone has equal access to the internet around the globe or in America, which is what we call the digital divide. Here's a breakdown of the world's population using internet compared to the world's total population by region. There is a discrepancy in proportions. Asia and the Pacific in the light purple is nearly half the world's population, but make up less than a quarter of the world's internet users. There's a maldistribution in the world. And though 2.7 billion people will be using the internet by the end of 2013, 4.4 billion are still not online. A large portion of the world is left out, though telecommunication companies are diligently at work to increase their reach. You'll notice on this map showing increase from 2011 to 2012 in internet users that Colombia, Kazakhstan, and Kenya stand out as having made the most significant strides toward access. 146 governments have adopted a plan to promote broadband, and 70% of those are developing countries, which is good for global internet increase. The United States also has a plan to increase broadband coverage, but we currently rank 29th for access. Though 78% of our citizens can get online, there is still a digital divide amongst Americans concerning connection speed. Speed or bandwidth makes a difference between just checking Facebook or starting an online business, so speed matters. Take a look at this map of world connection speeds. Korea is in the lead with an average of 22 megabits per second. The US has an average of 9.8 megabits per second, which is far ahead from the slowest connection times like in Egypt of 1.2 megabits per second. But the divide is apparent when we look at the cost to connect. The US is ninth in terms of high-speed internet access, but Americans pay a much higher price than most. For example, a month of high-speed bundled service in the capital of South Korea is $31.47, while in the capital of the United States, Washington, D.C., it is $209.99. This prompts the question, why is internet so expensive in the United States? Susan Crawford wrote in her book Captive Audience that Americans have allowed companies to cherry-pick wealthy neighborhoods for service and charge what they'd like. States, heavily lobbied by telecommunication companies, are seeking to get rid of any obligation to provide communication services to their citizens. Looking at the disparity of high-speed internet access by U.S. states, we see that only a small percentage of U.S. residents have access or can afford 10 megabits per second downstream bandwidth. The colored area in purple shows drops in states like Arkansas, Montana, and Oklahoma. When we consider populations with at least 6 megabits per second downstream speed, there is still a persisting inequality. The remaining portions of the graph in orange represent Americans without high-speed internet access. But looking at this chart shows that speed really does matter. At 10 megabits per second, you can download 10 MP3 songs in roughly half a minute. If you get down to 200 kilobits per second, that same amount would take you 22 minutes. It is hard to be a productive member of society with speeds that slow. The Federal Communications Commission marks 4 megabits per second as the cutoff for what is considered high speed. There is an inequality in socioeconomic status as well. 48% of people making less than $25K can connect to high-speed internet versus almost 90% of people making $150K. Interestingly, the rates for white and Asians exceed those for Black and Hispanics by 18 percentage points or more, and rural America lags behind urban areas by 10 percentage points in high-speed internet access. In an era when broadband is essential to innovation, jobs, and competitiveness, large corporations still decide who has access in America. Business professor Leonard Waverman suggests that the U.S. could increase its GDP by $100 billion with an increase of 10 additional broadband lines per 100 individuals. So as Americans look to spur the economy for a brighter future for the country, the nation's policymakers must make universal broadband deployment a higher priority.